welcome to NCW Tech Alliance's Business Bytes. This is part of our member-only series where we invite NCW Tech Alliance members to share a bite-sized program over the lunch hour for you to learn and engage. I want to welcome our guest today, Meliesa Tigard. Thank you so much for coming on air with us. Really appreciate the time. In just a few minutes, Meliesa is going to have a presentation for you on her math mapping program. I do want to mention that because we've recorded this webinar, this is going to live on the Tech Alliance website along with all past presentations. This is a resource and member benefit to you for supporting our nonprofit. And once we've released them onto our website, really the community can tap in and access that programming at any time. So it's something to come back to. I want to go ahead and introduce our guest. Meliesa is a teacher, academic coach, award-winning writer and speaker. She is with FocalPoint Educational Services, and she is going to present with us today. Meliesa, I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to you. Thank you so much for doing this.
You're welcome. Well, thank you for that lovely introduction. I appreciate that. As I put together this presentation today, I thought to myself, you know, if I'm giving some information to business people, we should talk about the business side of what it is that we're doing here. And as I thought through math mapping, which is what we're going to talk today, I thought I should label this "How to Get Your Big Idea to Market If You're Nobody from Nowhere, a Cautionary Tale." Because we're going to talk today about what my big idea is and the process that I have gone through with the big idea. My background is that I did a 2-year training program with a group of neurodivergent people learning how neurodivergent people learn. And I learned what was studied for that 2 years under a genius autistic dyslexic, which was one of the most fascinating things. Learned a lot about how the mind works, how a picture thinker is going to think differently, how a dyslexic thinks, how to then teach them. And we had a whole program designed around teaching reading for dyslexics, and that's where I started. And when I started in my first learning center, having gone through my training, I was very prepared to teach reading and language arts. I had an undergraduate degree in history. I was very comfortable with anything that was the written word, which was literally the opposite of my clients. So there is a question as to whether that was a fit, although I felt like I was comfortable with reading and with teaching reading. But I was afraid of math. And I had disliked it when I was at the university. I had not felt highly successful in math. I had taken one math class and then gone over to the liberal arts side of the campus and gotten my degree in history with a minor in German. And so I approached my boss and I said, I don't want to work with math. I'm afraid of it. I'm not going to be any good at teaching this. And he said, we're too small. You have to figure it out. And by the way, he offered very kindly to help me with some of my math anxiety, some of my fears, and we then proceeded to find some of the roots of what it was that I was confused by. And as I began with the math program that I had been taught, and I started working it with children, with younger primary school aged kids, when they got confused, I found that I got it. I understood why they were confused, because virtually every time it was something I had also found confusing when I was learning math. So it turns out here that my anxiety about math was rather displaced here because my understanding my students helped me then to troubleshoot when they were having problems. And so as they got into situations where they were having a hard time, I started figuring out ways to help them remember it. Some of these were strategies that I already had and had figured out in the course of my math career. But eventually what happened was my developing of math mapping. And that started literally 20 years ago, actually over 20 years ago now. And I had this moment where I saw on the number line how the patterns work. And it's one of those just divine inspiration moments where I saw it all, and it took me a while then to take it and to put it into words that I could show to my students. And so what ultimately comes of this is math mapping, which can teach a child to add, subtract, multiply, and divide in just a few sessions. It's one unified system. It all works together. It covers all of the math operations, and it's fast. My students average around 98% accuracy and fast enough to pass a timed test. So if you run into a parent who's like, oh my goodness, FocalPoint did something great for my kid, most of the time it's because of this particular math mapping that we do. And we have other programs we do as well, but this is the one that you just see these fast results. And of course, parents love that. And kids who've been struggling for 2 years to try and understand and remember their math facts, those same children will walk out of my office after one session counting forward and backwards by 7 and showing it off to their parents. So obviously moms are pretty happy and the kids are excited to be able to see something happening where previously they had studied and learned and practiced and then forgot it, and then had to study and learn and play more flashcards and more singy songs and more all of this stuff. And I have kids walking in my office, oh, I know this times table because I know the song, and they get 3 verses, about 9 times 1, 2, and 3 into the song, and by the time they're at the third one, they've forgotten the song, and now they don't know the times table anymore because they don't know the song. So what happened then was that let me just go back and tell you a little bit about math mapping and how it is that I developed it. I should clarify that high school and college math teachers will tell you that one of their top problems is that their kids don't know their basic math facts. And if you can't master the basics, then everything else doesn't make sense. Yes, I can hand you a calculator, but there's so many things that simply do not logically follow for you if you have not mastered your basics. So that's my answer to kids who are like, well, I can have a calculator. Why do I need this? Well, there is a genuine need for it. And I can give lots of examples of middle and high school math where if you don't have your basics down, it's going to be very complicated for you, and you're going to make lots of mistakes and get poorer grades all the way through. This was a collaborative effort between me and the kids. Sometimes I thought of something and the kid and a child that I put in front of it organized it in a way that I then showed to the next child. And sometimes it was a piece that I had figured out, and then a more confused child walked through my door, and all of the ways that I had to explain this didn't work, and now I had to troubleshoot a new piece. So from my initial moment of inspiration, it took a number of years to get from there to where I actually had the whole math mapping set up. So I'm going to share my screen now. And let's see, I'm going to share you this one here, and you should be able to see my screen now and my mouse here. This is the math map, and there's a couple of things that are different about this than your average in the hundreds board. You'll notice that it starts with 0 on the left, and it goes 0 to 9 on the top line. There are actually 10 numbers across the top line. That means that there's 10 columns, and in what you can see here, there's also 10 rows. This is because the early humans were organizing everything in groups of 10, and because they were organized, because they had 10 fingers, they organized in groups of 10, and we then inherited a number system that's based on 10s. You'll also notice on the math map that the gray one, that the odd numbers have been grayed, so that there are times when we only need to focus on the even numbers, and that allows us to do that. So I'm going to give you just a little bit of a picture of what that initial inspiration looked like for me. And here, let's see, there we go. And if I can make this a little bit larger. Let's go to 90%. All right. You can see here is the same math map we looked like at before. 0 to 9 is across the top. Then we have the teens row, 10 to 19. The 20s row goes 20 to 29. And you can see that the 9 times tables, if you were counting by 9, are circled across this math map. This one was the first one that I saw. It's the easiest one to see. If you count by 9s in a system that's based on 10s, 9 is 1 back from 10. So it's going to take you back 1 and down as you travel through the system. This happens when you count by 9s. It also happens when you add a 9. So if I picked a number anywhere on this page, I pick 47, and I go to add 9 to it, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to go back 1 and down. So as I learn to visualize the math map, now I can visualize adding 9 or subtracting 9 to any number using the same jump. 9 has a unique signature. It goes back 1 and down. That's what I'm going to do anytime I count by a 9. That then leads us to seeing the pattern, which is what every number ends with. And you'll notice that when you count by 9, the numbers end 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. And using that, I have the student learn very quickly to write out the numbers from 9 down to 0 and count forward and back from 9 to 90 and from 90 backwards to 9. And we do that in the first session, and oftentimes we work on the 8s in the first section as well. Again, it's the exact same thing. It's a system that's based on 10. I have 10 fingers. If I put 8 fingers up, 2 fingers are down. So my fingers are going to help me see how this system works. 8 and 2, I call them partners, are going to work together. And so if I want to think in 8, it's faster and easier for me to visualize taking 2 steps and then going down. And so that's what we teach the student to do. When I count by 8s, I'm going to take 2 steps and then go down a row. And I'm going to continue doing that, which means the 8s sets up a pattern that starts with 8, goes down to 0, and is even numbers only. And when I teach my students this, I teach them to just skip 1, count 1 from the 9s times table that they've already learned how to write. And now they have the 8s, it's just the even ones from the 9 times tables. That then sets us up a pattern that's like 2, 4, 6, 8. Who do you appreciate? But going the other direction. And so 8 counts 8, 6, 4, 2, 0. And you'll see that kind of on the bottom of this page. And I'm going to make this a little bit bigger here for you. On the bottom of the page, you can see that the 8s, if you count them, it just continues to go in this pattern, 8, 6, 4, 2, 0. We count from 8 across to 40 across the pattern. Then we go to 48 and we go across the pattern again to 80. We go to 88, we go across the pattern again to 120. You start to see that this same pattern just repeats itself over and over again. So I can learn very quickly how to count by 8s, not just the first 2 or 3 of them, like the song helps me remember, but the whole system. And by the way, could continue to 120 very easily if asked to. I can also use the same process to add or subtract an 8, just visualizing moving in the math map, which is a picture we all basically already have in our head. And it doesn't take very long or very much practice to learn how to add or subtract 8 from any number, just visualizing, make a couple of steps on the math map, and kids get very fluent very quickly. Division, I just teach as a matter of learning to keep track of how many times you counted. So essentially, I'm going to set up the question by saying, if I count by 8s to 24, how many times did I count? That's 3 times 8, 16, 24. So the answer is 3. There's lots of ways we can think about division. We can ask ourselves what we multiply to get that number. Any way you do it, you can still use the pattern and the multiplication that you learned. 7s are where things get a little bit interesting. It looks at first like it's a pattern that you would never be able to learn, but I set this up on the calculator or the computer keypad, and my kids can count forward and backwards by 7s and also by 3s, and faster than you would think. And it's very quickly that I teach them to move to an empty tic-tac-toe instead of having the numbers organized like on the calculator, and then just visualize the numbers. And they can then add, subtract, multiply, and divide with 7s and 3s using that. 6s and 4s are also going to have opposite patterns to each other using even numbers only. And I don't want to like overwhelm you with all kinds of details here. But there's, let's see, next one. You can see the 3s here. They look a lot like the 7s do. And then we can look at the 12s and the 13s. I like to give 12s as a good example because it just counts like a 2, 2, 4, 6, 8, skip a line 0. And then it does the same thing again. So it's very quick to teach a kid how to count by 12s and even 13s down here, which is just like the 3s. It's just extended out a little bit. And the children can learn the process of getting their answers quickly and fluently. So as I was working with this with the kiddos and learning how to teach it and got better and better at it and started teaching teachers at it, I got the idea to make this into software. And I thought if I can make this into software, the hardest thing for me to do is to teach another person to teach my way. Like I can show you what the patterns are, but actually take a confused kid through the process of learning how to learn this way is backwards from the way any of the teachers that I've ever worked with have been taught to think. And so people have to do a lot of unlearning. And it takes a lot of work for me to train a new person how to teach math mapping and get a student from the first stage all the way to independent, which of course is my goal. I want you to walk out of my office and be able to do your multiplications and your adding and subtracting on a computer or a piece of paper at school without me being there. And so the process of getting from point A to point Z here is a lot of steps, and I have to train all of that as I teach people how to do it. So this is where we get into the cautionary tale, because here I am, I'm a person with a learning center in Wenatchee, Washington, and I have an idea. Let's make software, make a tech product out of this idea that I've had. And I go to business advisors here in Wenatchee, and the business advisors that I went to, the first thing that they were saying to me was, you need to get a patent. You have to protect your idea. You have to protect your IP because someone could take it for you. So I contact a patent attorney and I start that process, and I have to go over to Seattle and I take that all over and we do this whole patenting that takes several years. And what I found out in the course of this process is that the patent office takes the position that anything that you can think of has already been thought of, and you have to prove the opposite. So after 3 times of them sending it back to me and saying, no, this is obvious just based on a hundreds board. And I know it's so intricate and it takes so many steps for me to get people to actually learn it. It's not obvious at all. Otherwise, everyone would know it. I am now tens of thousands of dollars into this patenting process in my tiny little learning center in Wenatchee, where I'm struggling to make ends meet because of this. So what I have one person who's a business advisor advised me to get a team together. And so we need to get marketing folks and a software engineer and a high school principal who knows how to write grants. And we're all going to get together and we're going to figure out how to create this thing. And so I get the team together and we take a day and we write it all down, and the software guy talks to the grant writer and the educator, and we figure out all the details, and they're going to write me up this how to get there from here. And what I get is a report, and remember this is 20 years ago. What I get is a report that says, well, it's going to take about $850,000 to create this. So now I need to find investors, and this is just getting this product to market, to get it built, is now way more expensive than what I can afford myself with my little learning center. So I get a written proposal and I'm ready to go to investors, and I go to Washington, D.C. to a conference and find a publisher for a written book version. And I get a literary agent who's happy to look at what I'm doing, but ultimately that whole process is stymied by the fact that if you're not already a talking head out somewhere who's already got an audience, who's already guaranteed to want to buy your book, then publishers don't want to print your book in the first place because it's expensive, and you need to kind of already be somebody. So here I am yet again at this place where you have to already be there in order to get there. And that didn't go anywhere. I went and I actually met with the head of Hooked on Phonics. At the time, they were putting together Hooked on Math. And I went to a conference that I knew he was at and showed up and showed him my prototype and talked to him and got a demo with Hooked on Phonics. And so we talked about putting this into the Hooked on Math product. But at the time, what I had required me doing the teaching. And they were like, yeah, this looks great, but we can't package you and send you out in our product. And you don't have something that's built to just go out into our system. And this is going to require research and development in order to move this to a point where it can be packaged. So go do the research and development, come back and talk to us. And again, here I am with this, if you were already there, then you could get there, as sort of a scenario. I wrote a written version of the manual for teachers, and then I did a demo in the Wenatchee School District. I took it to East Wenatchee and Wenatchee both. Wenatchee looked at it. I taught 3 teachers. I wrote a manual for students to work with. They put it in a couple of classrooms, but the teachers came back to me and said, it was really hard to do this in a classroom because I had some students who kind of already knew their times tables, and they did this at middle school, so they had already been taught. So I had some students who already knew it and they were ready to race through the whole workbook the first day. And I had other students who were confused and didn't get it at all. And it was difficult to use as a classroom application. Now, I would say that it might be a more usable classroom application at 4th grade, but at 6th grade, we weren't seeing that. And the process that I had written all of the manual or had done all of the time and the effort on ultimately didn't fit the curriculum. And here I am back to square one. I take the written proposal that I have to some angel conferences over in the Seattle area. I never find an investor. I invest time and effort and thousands and thousands of dollars going one direction and another, trying to get this to the place where I have a product that I can take to market. And so that's why I want it to be a cautionary tale, because this can be so much more complicated than you realize when you start. But at the end of the day, here I am in my learning center with about 100 to 200 kids a year who I can teach this process to, or have my teachers that I've trained to teach it to, and it's changing lives. It's impacting lives in my community. And so I keep seeing it work. I keep seeing it prove itself to me, and it never leaves my mind. And what happens then is, over the course of time, technology advances. And now there's some software for virtual learning, because, we had the pandemic, lots of virtual learning started happening. It became more popular. And now there's software for teaching people through virtual learning that wasn't available back when I convened that team, because we've moved on as a culture. And so I started with a software guy last winter. And now I finally have the first part of a prototype. And we were able to get through the early parts of my system, at which point the software guy that I worked with came back to me and said, this is really beyond my scope to take this to the next step, and you'll need to hire a firm. And so that's where I am today, which is I have some references to a couple of different firms. I'm working on bringing the prototype to them, but I do feel like I have some control of it now. It's not like I have to just go and have somebody build it, and it's going to be $850,000. I can build this in pieces as I can afford to. And that's the process that I'm in now. I've got the first part of the system already in a software scenario. Parts of the rest of it will be based on that, but then there will be voiceovers and other sorts of things that need to be done. But I can get this prototype finished as I can afford it. And I can use it and fine tune it with the students at FocalPoint. And once I have something that I'm comfortable with, something that I can see can teach students at FocalPoint, that's when I am going to start moving towards the Flywheel Conference and other opportunities where I can take an already packaged tech product to the next level. And that's where math mapping is now. It's a really great teaching product in a very small place that's impacting some kids, but not nearly enough. And in the process of being built into a tech product that I hope to change a lot of lives with. And as I thought through where I'm at today, I thought, even if I failed to get this software version out into the larger community, I'm still going to impact kids' lives every day through the course of my career. There's still something that we're doing. I have a strong belief, however, I just can't give up on this thing. And I think that that's one of the things that I want to leave you with is don't give up hope. I believe I'm going to get this done. I believe that there's going to be a time when the name math mapping is synonymous with a product that is well known and that is being sold as a software version, and that is going to happen. And the other thing that I want to leave you with is to be very cautious as you are in the process of building something, because sometimes the advice you get from people who are very well-meaning can end up sending you down rabbit holes that take you a lot of extra time that maybe you could avoid. So I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Meliesa, wonderful presentation today. Thank you so much. And we started off in this conversation about your math mapping program, and how you're serving 100 to 200 youth in our community annually. I love how you talked about, getting those basics in math when they're young so that they're set up for success through the whole pathway of their, K-12 education and then beyond if they're choosing to go beyond. And how, your personal experience with not enjoying math and then how you were looking at changing that, because I think that's been such a stereotypical fear of like, well, I don't like math. I'm not good at it. I'm scared of it. And now that scaling process of how do you get math mapping out there, and how hard you've been working along the way to get math and mapping out there. That's, I didn't know all those details, how long you've been really working through the process of development in the software, development as far as, a company and raising funds. And so thank you for being vulnerable and sharing that part of the entrepreneurial journey, because we often talk about the success and the shiny moment at the end and not all the grit and hard work that goes through it. So, so insightful for our members today. I want to encourage, as we wrap up, we're going to include on our website how you can get in touch with FocalPoint Educational Services. Mm-hmm. So if you have a student at home that needs some support, not just in math, but also in reading and writing, FocalPoint Educational Services is a resource for you to check out. And then Meliesa, we'll be cheering you on in your journey. I think we need to do a part 2 later, just as that software develops and you can get out and scale.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Thanks so much for being here, and be sure to check out our next Business Bites next month.